Hello, welcome to this edition of the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV. I am Phillip Muliisa. Today, I have very powerful young people in the studios, and we are taking the conversation to climate change, to whether we are discussing Uganda's preparedness, to the emerging or to the adverse effects of climate change, and we have a background of what is happening globally, but if I try to minimize it to the continent. We know what is happening in the East African region. Floods in Kenya, floods in Tanzania, floods in Rwanda. When you move out of this region, you go to the southern part, they have the opposite of that. You have extremely high temperatures, grasslands drying up, water bodies drying up, animals dying, human beings lacking enough water to use for their domestic and economic use. And we want to discuss on this show to find out, should any of these now invade our country? Because if we're neighbors with Kenya, if we're neighbors with Sudan, you can't know what is up for tomorrow. We want to discuss how prepared is our country for such an extremity of either the rains or the sunshine, and where we go as a country. Now, joining me on that conversation is a panel of distinguished young people whom I will give a minute each to introduce themselves, and we shall get into the conversation later. I will start with the lady on the show. You're most welcome. Talk to us.
Thank you so much, Philip. My name is Sharon Karungi from Kyambogo University.
Sharon Karungi, you're most welcome to the show, and we can't wait to hear the views you bring us from Kyambogo University, and special greetings to the Kyambogo University community. Next to Sharon is a very common face on the show. Gentlemen, you're most welcome.
Thank you so much to our viewers. My name is Godwin Bushanda. I'm just a grandson of the revolutionary government. I'm happy to be here.
The grandson of the revolutionary government, Bushanda Godwin. He refuses to talk to us about the other details on his CV. Very many titles, very big man in the room, but we're happy to have you. And last but not least, gentlemen, karibu.
Asante sana. Colleagues, my name is Hafashimana Asiimwe. And I am a comrade as usual. And while we discuss and make sense of this discussion, I am also glad to really be part of this discussion that will bring out contented matters. Yeah, I'm the president of the Uganda Democracy Academy, a proud Ugandan. See you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hafashimana Asiimwe. We're happy to have you here. And I want to start this conversation really with you, Asiimwe. In very many spaces, wherever you go, there is always a conversation about climate change. Quite rarely, but also there in the Parliament of Uganda. But in all these platforms, you get to the conferences, the conventions, the United Nations, they're talking climate change. What is this climate change they talk about?
Thank you to the viewers and for the starters. Climate change is a very serious issue, and there are matters to do with climate change, climate justice are ideal, whereas we try to find and preserve the generations to come, while the current generation is suffering the impacts of climate change. Just to put it on record, in about 3 weeks, if not a month, the government of Uganda appointed a new minister in charge of
Disaster
and preparedness, Honorable Lilian Abel, who is a product of youth leadership. And while we talk about climate change, therefore the young people got a noble role to ensure that they preserve or they implement robust approaches to having better renewable energies. And while you might recall, about 2 years ago, students' movement had a demonstration whereby there was a resolution from, I think, the European Union Parliament and it was about stopping ECOP, while it would come with either both positive impacts but also negative impacts. And looking at climate change, of course, it comes with rising temperatures. And I think for the past around 50 years, there has always been an increase of about 1.5 degrees Celsius. And this, of course, at the end of the day, it leads to things to do with global warming. We have, in recent, I think about 4 months, we had the heat waves around Kampala. When you look into our neighborhood, which is part of the Africa Mashariki, we have had colleagues from South Sudan and Sudan die over increased heat waves. And while here in Kampala, like in other parts in Uganda, we have had the same. And as we talk today, I think there was an accident in Kisoro, because there was a collision of buses and a few other cars, while Kisoro has experienced terrible landslides. And while we make sense of this robust discussion, it is on record that the government of Uganda has taken up strategic effort to ensure that they help the marginalized and those affected by either the floods or the drought by settling them. While we have not forgotten our colleagues from Gododa, from Chibuku, all those to do with hilly mountainous areas. And to do with the climate resilient agricultural practice, because when the climate change comes in, or like we see today, it has a lot of effects on agriculture, on economic practices, and of course in an education bit of it, people have come out to advocate. And while you address the question of having this variety and a number of conferences addressing climate change, we have had others in Saudi, in fact. And while we were served in UNSA, we had one of us represent us there to simply address the same issues. So while we look into what is happening in Hoima, because the contention was that in case we have the oil pipeline economic activity, we shall have impacts which will negatively affect people. Either most of them will be displaced, or what if the pipe can burst and therefore the people around it will be affected. However, it also comes with economic benefits. People get jobs. Of course, when you produce this oil, that they look at being an output or a product of having changes with the climate change. Of course, at the end of the day, our economy will boost. Just put on record, when the colonialists came in Africa here, they used the Bible to go and exploit resources in Congo. And it was economic in nature, whereas they said that the poor will not enter heaven. And in fact, the poor will enter heaven, whereas the rich will not what? Enter heaven. The ideal was, since Congo is endowed with the resources, then the white man should come and exploit these resources, while the Congolese would be subjected to becoming poor in a matter of entering into heaven. Meanwhile, as they were reading the Bible, there was an idea of exploiting resources, which has had a number of economic, climate changes impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that really detailed analysis of climate change and what it is. Karungi, in your view, how do you understand this so-called climate change, climate crisis in the world today?
Well, thank you so much, Philip. My own understanding, I feel like climate change, this is something that talks about things like high temperatures increasing in the country, increasing all over the world, which is actually something that is happening currently throughout the entire nation and all that. But secondly, it is something that we can try to avoid if we all put in effort as a nation, as a country, or actually globally. But it is something that we are trying to, we are looking at it from a short angle instead of looking at it in a very long-term view. For example, we as Ugandans, we may look at it like something that is only affecting us, because this is something that has happened it's coming from our grand generations and all that, and we are facing this kind of effects. And the more we do not decide to work on it, or the more we decide to look at it at a short angle, that means that even our future generation or the incoming generation is still going to suffer this kind of temperatures. That is why we are seeing climate change. You're going to see forecasts changing, because at a point in time when you're expecting rain, it is going to become suddenly hot. That's why you're seeing like a country like South Sudan puts a lockdown because of it's putting a lockdown because of increased heat and all that. So we need to look at it as a long-term thing that we need to take away, or we need to look at it like something that is affecting not only one person or not only affecting one sector, but it's affecting the entire globe and affecting all, let's say, all the sectors globally. Let it be farming, let it be tourism, let it be what? Because at a point in time when now you're seeing South Sudan reaches a point of putting something like lockdown, then this means that children are missing out, because at the point in time whereby these people are going to go home, you're not going to say that you're going to teach them from home and all that. But it's because we have failed to understand that climate change is something that needs to be treated urgently, or it's supposed to be treated as a priority, not like a minority and all that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Bushanda, see, when you listen to Karungi here, she tells us, she mentions a couple of countries that have gone to the level of instituting a lockdown. She talks about addressing it urgently. And what does this bring to my mind? Normally when we talk climate change, one of the terms that come out is we are in the climate crisis. Help me understand, help the viewer understand the kind of crisis we are in terms of climate. Where are we? What stage are we at?
Thank you so much, Muliisa and comrades. You see, when we are talking about climate change, I was taking notes. I said to them, taking notes. I have come to learn, but also I'm going to give my views as a person here.
Could that be one of the revolutionary tactics?
I have heard views from my brother there from the hills of Wichisoro. I have heard from my sister here. But why people talk about climate crisis? We have, I wrote here down around 7 issues. We have politics. We have selfish and unserious people. Did you see videos? Some 2 people who are pouring, is it the rubbish in running water around Kampala? Yes. You saw it trending. We have technology advancements where people tell you that it's possible you can build a house in the swamp, and then it sustains for years and years. That is technology advancement which is coming. Then you have increased population. You see, land is a factor of production. But you cannot stretch land. Even when God was creating this world, there was land, there was water, there were swamps, there was air. So we have that increased population, which is in there where to stay. Where can I stay? What can I do? Then you have unemployment. When I talk about unemployment, where I come from, if I to ask my brother here, I'm not sure if she comes from villages like you come from, but at least me and him, we share some villages, the background of villages. A young person down there finds it fit to go in the bush or in the forest and cut down trees to bring firewood and sell them in the centers. True, false? True. For him to get money. So unemployment is pushing these people to attack the nature.
You know, there is, if you allow me briefly, there is a politician in one of the regions of this country who recently constructed a bridge and has been trending online for having put up that structure.
Is it inside of Yes, in Ndoro East. Is it Ndoro East?
But I think he also used cut down some trees and put together.
Now we have development, which is coming in that development where people find it fit to congest Kampala and they call it development. Am I making sense? Then you have economic pressure, like my brother was talking about. Now economic pressure, that's why you bring the ECOP, minerals are being established, and now there's economic pressure, you have nothing to do is to attack the nature. Now, the crisis we have in this country, you see, sometimes I look at what we do and I wonder if we know even what we are doing. If you look at the parliament, and very many conventions are being held, like you said, we had COP28, we have had several of them. We have had activists of climate change around the country. We have even globally they are there. But what are they addressing? If a poor person there, a young person, feels that for me, I cannot afford 2 meals a day, I need $1, and the dollar is, I think, around 3,000 plus something money. This person is going to be either forced to go and cut firewood in the forest, and the forest, this is a natural forest. For example, if you have ever passed to Mabira is not a forest like it used to be. If you're to enter inside the Mabira, I saw a documentary on NTV when Sudhir Ruhanga was making a documentary about that, and you see how they are cutting trees. And these people are protected. There is economic pressure, there is unemployment, there is development which is coming, there is actually, the whole monster is globalization, which is coming. If you match all the points I've talked about. Now, why we say there is a climate crisis is that we have not taken things serious. Before you go to Dubai for COP28 convention and we are speaking those good English, are we doing even the little we're supposed to do? We are not doing it. If me, I think my first time to see people cooking using charcoal was around 2014. I was in senior 1. 2014 I was in senior 1 at St. Anne's College, Chitovu. I used to know that, actually, I used to know that whoever cooks in a village uses firewood because that's where it was. We would get pangas, go to the bush and cut, and even cut trees so they dry. In the future, we get firewood, but we would not plant a tree. There was no replanting. And where do you think if you had to go in our farms? This man has always interacted with farm people. What people are doing now, the cattle keepers, they are clearing their farms. They're leaving the land bare and they call it, now the farm is very smart. What the bushes are doing there, they're cutting the bush, that the pesticides we're using, they're affecting us. Even you talked about, is it agriculture? Like a way of curbing down climate. But you talk about, you go to Mubuku irrigation scheme in Kasese and see what kind of chemicals are they using, how are they affecting the soil. In future, we shall have all this being under climate crisis. But the problem we have, if as people would champion one thing and say, enough is enough, I think, to my own understanding, really, Hafashimana, I, and this lady, and even you and everyone, we don't need 1 billion to go and advocate for climate change in my village. We don't need it.
Yes, thank you, Bushanda.
Let me bring this. Let me bring this. So before you chip in, we have the government starts very good projects of maybe trying to mitigate the climate change in this country, but along the way it loses track. For example, if you're to go in my village and even his village, very few people have electricity. Where is the rural electrification in this country? Where is it? So that you tell someone, don't cut down trees, you can use electricity to cook. So that this is sustainable. But they have no option. And we shall keep in that crisis, not until we realize that actually we cannot fight nature.
Thank you, Godwin, for that amazing submission. Asiimwe, you see, he talks about these things, but I want you to help us paint a clear picture of how, he mentioned Mabira Forest, and he talks about the Sudilvia Ruhanga documentary, but you see, Uganda is bigger than Mabira Forest. East Africa is bigger than Uganda, and you have Africa, and by extension, the entire world. Scientists talk about how life has been on this planet for about 4 million years. But for those 4 million years, the environment has been there, and development was there. Civilization was there. Why is it such so that at this particular point in time is when we have this crisis? What did we get wrong as a generation?
That's an interesting question. In the African traditional setting, let me make it clear that the more the monkey climbs up the tree, the more it exposes her anus. And while generations have passed off, have passed on, and we have new generations coming in, the then do's against climate justice are the results of climate change today. So if we continued doing the same activities that we do today, now the coming generations will be affected the more. So that answers and explains the adage I began with. Let's assume there is ECOP going on as we talk. Some oil, like they say, Total is in charge. But this oil might not be used to produce fuel or petrol, but can be used to construct tarmac roads. And in that way, we are shifting from the other negative impacts of climate change. Because we are now we have had an advocacy around having electric cars. And I think that is one of the steps to creating climate justice as we talk. You have also seen motorcycles today in Kampala which are electric. Why? Because we are trying to mitigate climate change. And I think the government, you have seen the original commander, NRA, President Museveni. He's very clear and he's in fact in good will to ensure that we have climate justice. And in schools, today we have clubs. When you interact deeply with my good friend Sharon, she will tell you they are having debate clubs, which some of the topics are subjected and geared to having climate justice from the current breed of younger leaders. And therefore it is a clarion call to our colleagues who are viewing us, that you see, when you go to Western Uganda, especially in Kabale, which is Rwanda today, there is a place which they used to call, I think is called Mutenga. So the road is at the top of the hill, and if there was any mistake then, and the driver made a mistake, they would easily roll down to the lowland. So people then, I think one of the aspiring MPs by then, they made a campaign of planting trees around the road, near the road sides, so that it does not only help to create and protect people's lives, but also be part to create rainfall. Because I'm told when you plant trees, because of the green carrying substance around that vegetation from the trees, then you can easily, I think, I don't know the science there, but ideally, there is a way you receive rainfall at the end of the day. And also the climate change, by the way, we are talking about today, regardless of affecting the generations that are going to come, there has been a drastic shift on how we receive rainfall. That's why around this month, when you hear people of Chisoro crying, people of Kabale crying, people of Chibuku crying, there has been a change in the patterns on how rainfall is now being received. Today we'll be heading for a dry season. May, June, July. But it's raining today. Why? Because of the failure, perhaps of some of the individuals, not to practice and ensure that they do justice to the climate we have today. Today, I don't know what I could really how I could explain this in particular, but I think we have people who do not mind. Obviously, people do not take care of how they will be affected in the near future. Not until when we had a heat wave in recent days in Kampala that people, I think now we should be serious on climate justice. So, long story short, it is ideal for each of us to mind about, let us have more conversations around climate justice. And I think very soon, if it is not late this month, then early next month, we are supposed to have an environment parliament. Why? Young leaders from institutions, from wherever they become, they are convening at parliament to discuss on how they should be able to promote climate justice. And I think it's a good take for some of us to trust ourselves into some of those conversations.
Thank you so much. Karungi, one of the things he talks about is climate justice. And from the ordinary understanding of justice is making sure we treat this, whatever contributes to climate right, such that we can get the right results from this climate. One of the things involved is, for example, like many activists have come out to say, is halt on projects of exploration of minerals, the oil we have in that southwestern part of the country, talk about mining the gold, talk about mining the graphite and all the other minerals. If we do so, yes, we get the climate justice in the end. What happens to the economic justice?
That's a tricky question, but at the end of the day, one thing we need to understand is, with or without this, without us treating climate crisis as an urgency, or without treating it as a genuine matter, doesn't really solve it. Because at the end of the day, what we need is, because what current statistics show us that climate change has contributed greatly to poverty and all that. So even at a point in time when we all say that, at a point in time when we are trying to fight for climate justice, we are going to lose out on what? On, let's say, the economy. But still, it doesn't change the fact that in between us fighting, or us not fighting climate justice, we still lose out on the economy. Because you're going to see farmers, because, for example, a country like Uganda mainly develops on things like agriculture, tourism, and so on. So at a point in time when this climate justice is not tackled or is not treated with a matter of urgency, then this means you're going to lose out twice, rather than in a world whereby you're treating this as an urgency, because we believe when you treat climate change, still the economy will be what influenced or will not be greatly affected, because you see farmers will be able to, let's say, plant crops and all that, because even these minerals still need us to have a healthy environment free from climate change, or maybe things like floods, things like carbon dioxide and all that. And in the long run, if we look at countries which have things like industrialization, it mainly comes back now down, because the materials they use are from the environment. So at a point in time when you don't protect these things, then that means that the economy, you're going to lose out times too. You're going to lose the economy. You are going to now be greatly affected by climate change. But thirdly, what do we see? We see that, as you already talked about the youth and all that, you see, the youth hold the biggest number in specific societies, and at a point in time when now you do not educate them that, and you're only teaching them about how it's going to affect the economy. Mind you, personally, I feel like we as a youth, we are more minded about money. So at a point in time when you now tell them that, we are going to lose out on economy, so they would rather now defend the economy than defending what we call climate justice. So we are going to still go back to the crisis. We are going to go back to zero. And as I think when I began, I told us that this is something that is so urgent that needs us to concentrate and all that. He says that some people are so adamant and all that. Now, how does this happen? That even when government is coming out with things like long sustainability plans to curb climate change, or things like different policies or laws, because when we were growing up, we were taught that if you cut one tree, you replace it by either 5 trees, but you have to reforest it and all that. But this is not the case these days. Someone is going to cut down a tree knowing, at the end of the day, it's me getting money. They are cutting down these trees because they feel like if they cut down this tree or this specific amount of trees, they are going to get money and all that. But then the moment you start educating these people that, this is something, you see, if our leaders start treating it as a level of urgency, then that means these people down, as they say that people in villages, deep down in villages such as Karamoja, because we see like districts like Karamoja are really suffering, because at a point in time when now their cattle no longer have what to graze on, they don't have the water, or maybe people are dumping rubbish into water sources and all that. Or he talks about overpopulation. But even if that overpopulation is there, personally, I believe if these people are educated that, even when the numbers are many, still planting, building in a swamp area or in a wetland area means that you're going to affect you're going to affect the future generation, because now you're blocking its passage and all that. But now going back to that sort of economy, you see, I already show you that millions of people are suffering, are living in the poverty lane and all that, because of what? Because of climate change. The point in time when now businesses are not moving on because of the increased maybe rainfall, or maybe increased floods and all that. Or also let's talk about the heat and all that. You see, a country like South Sudan will actually put a lockdown. How? Because they feel like this is out of hand. This heat actually comes back to someone's health and all that, affects them. So that means we'd rather first interfere and connect, or rather come up and protect the climate by teaching people that you need to afforestate, you don't need to dump rubbish in water, you don't need, like the things we have always learned. And talks about using electricity and all that. Now, this is the reason as to why people do not use electricity, because they feel it is expensive. But at a point in time, when we come up with a solution, if government came up with a solution... And
Karungi, every one of us here has gone through primary education.
Yeah.
And we are taught this afforestation, reforestation, irrigation, but we're not doing this.
Yeah, we
Ask
are not doing.
has ever reforested.
Because I've never cut down a tree. But I feel like...
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Godwin, one of the tables, Karungi here tries to overturn is, she's shaking a table of economics. Young people want money. They're money-minded. I don't know how to... I think that should be a topic for the next show. But where I want you to help us address is, the balance between the money and the climate. What options do we have For example, if we choose not to explore oil, if we choose not to dig out the gold, if we choose not to, do the constructions he talked about, what options do we have to survive? Because in the end, a population cannot survive impoverished overall.
You see, climate change has not just come. I think my brother elaborated it very well. And we are not suffering because about this climate change because of the ECOP in Hoima. That's not true. Two, before I come to your question, I want us to agree that nature will kill us. And you see, nature does not sympathize. Whether you planted a tree or not, we shall die. That's the truth. Because those are thousands that floods killed. You saw what happened in Kenya. You saw what happened here in Uganda actually itself. Do you think those people, they don't love to stay on earth and also do other things? They do. So you may be here in Kampala suburb, you think you're in Tinda, you're untouchable, and tomorrow becomes a very strong wind by the time you wake up and the whole routine is down. And that's how climate change is. It can come at any time, it can find you there. Because how many hills are in Kampala? Very many buildings here in Kampala, they're in swamps. Many of them. But come to your conclusion, to your question about money and then climate. I don't think, as well as I talked about economic pressure, I did not specifically undermine the government programs of excavating minerals or even drilling oil in Hoima. And we can have the two running concurrently. You can have the project running and at the same time you can protect the environment. For example, I think he's going to correct me and I think you guys have been following up. Where the pipeline is passing, I think all the people that if it passes in your land, they compensate you and you leave that land. It means they don't want you to interrupt with what? With the pipeline. Because I think you saw how they are going to be how oil is going to be transported from here to Tanga. I think they first hit because they said it has the highest percentage of wax. So they need to first hit it, then it proceeds to Tanga. So I think the government has been doing that. And really, I don't think where the pipeline is passing takes even I don't know the width or the length, but it is not even a big area. If you're to go and follow up that pipeline, because I have seen the plans, one of the pipeline passes actually almost across our farm where I come from, but where it is passing, does not even take the huge land that you're going to be left economically redundant. That's the truth. And what's the benefits of ECOP vis-a-vis climate protection? That's, I think, the question you asked about. We can have the two concurrently running. We can have this. What the government needs to do is to make sure that before this oil is drilled, are the climate questions answered? We have the carbon dioxide emissions because we're going to have a plant there. We are having maybe in a case where the pipe gets a problem and maybe the oil is spilling off. I think there was also a question of how they're going to be, where they're going to be depositing the wastes. I think there was also that question. And of recent, I saw ministers saying that they already have that area, they are constructing it, they're going to be depositing the waste after transporting the oil, where the wastes are going to be transported, where they're going to be deposited actually. Then we were looking at an area maybe where the pipeline is passing, maybe in a river or in a swamp. How do you work on that? If the government can easily look onto that, I don't think this project is going to affect anyone. Just that people, that's why I told you about politics. People always want something small to spark and then they drive in politically.
You see, just briefly, allow me. For such a project of that magnitude, usually there is something called the environmental impact assessment.
Definitely.
And you cannot execute any project of that magnitude without it.
Yes.
However, even with that, for example, a few months ago we had, I think, a resolution from the EU Parliament advising and calling on their investors through Total and the others not to put their money into such a project because even with the due diligence done towards the environment, they think in the future it is going to affect the people indirectly. And why I bring this out is because you talk about the politics.
Yes.
is the politics oversounding the due diligence we have to do in these projects?
You see, let me tell you, Muliisa. I don't think the European Union Parliament coming up with that resolution to withdraw some companies from drilling oil in Uganda was in the spirit of environment. You see, sometimes we don't read things deeply. We just look at the surface and we make noise. Ask yourself, is it Uganda is not the first country in this world to drill oil? True, false?
Not even among
Yes,
the first 100.
exactly. This is actually, I think this is the first time Uganda is doing it as a country, but it's not the first. If you read the reports of the countries which are drilling oil, go to Algeria, go to Libya, which is a desert actually area, but now here it is affected by flood itself because of the dams which were constructed by late Gaddafi. Look, you go in these Arab countries and it's how they drill their oil. And how are they, the problem, why EU puts all that pressure is not about environment. It's about wanting the political power, the autonomy, so that Uganda has to agree with some conditions. And trust me, okay, if they said that, did it stop? It is still ongoing. So the issue is not about climate. I think they assessed everything. There was environmental assessment, like you talked about. The report was released. This is what it is, this is what it is. We may not achieve 100%, but if the environmental assessment is saying 90% or 95%, the project can proceed. I don't see the reason as why a European Union Parliament says withdraw because in the future it's going. Do you think those UK people, they don't have climate issues? They do. They have the worst. But the issue is, for them, they politicize everything. European Union wants power. This is power, it's politics I was telling about you. Now, you wait very soon, you're going to see why even the countries are trying to lobby finances to mitigate climate. Now there's an issue, now the country like Uganda, the issue of LGBTQ now, where the Anti-Homosexual Act is now an act now in place. Mm-hmm. There's going to be that touch. Now they're going to say, okay, if you want this, this is what we need. So there is a problem of politics, and politics has affected the climate. But how people are using, people think that everything, we cannot do this because we want this. If Uganda can solve its problems, climate in a climate way, in a local way, in an African setting, then we're losing here. We're not showing our autonomy as European Union. This is, if I'm sorry to say this, but this is nonsense. If I can say, you see. There are very many other countries that are having more problems than Uganda. And the issue of climate change, where the issue is, let them come and advise. Okay, have they said that you people, we are not going to give money to the government because the government has refused to make people leave Bududa, go and settle in other land, in other lowland areas, or you go to Kasese. Up to now, they can't mention that. But they will mention climate as if we have had as if the oil we started drilling it, as if the problem has the anticipate, but the anticipation is in the politics. So there is a lot of politics, and not until we solve that politics. I don't want us to go in politics of ECOP. ECOP is a good project. I don't see a problem with it. But even you see, climate change is not about drilling oil. It is a contribution of small things that we call small that impact this environment. You come to Kampala here. Do you have people getting garbage and dumping into the trenches, and the drainage system is blocked and everything? Should we put it to ECOP? Is it the reason as to why Kampala is flooding? Is it the reason as to why temperatures are high here? Have we started even excavating that? And what is the contribution of the drilling of oil in Hoima vis-a-vis the climate change? What is it impacting? Is it people really constructing in swamps, the so-called investors? The Europeans even, they're talking about the climate, the drilling of oil, but the investors are even putting factories in swamps. They're not complaining, saying, yeah, our investors, Uganda has no more land, don't construct in swamps, go. No, they are okay. But they are because they want them to be involved in the agreement of the oil, how it is supposed to be drilled, and they want a certain percentage, but the president is saying, no, this is what's supposed to be done. They think now they have lost it all. So they will politicize it, and what we can use that people can hear is climate, because it's what is on table.
Thank you, and I like what you point out in that particular aspect, because, for example, around the time that resolution was passed, apparently, the UK government had also passed another resolution to allow for the UK to explore for oil in the North Sea. But two, you had the American government, again around that time, passing aid to Ukraine, and someone was talking about that whole situation and saying, so yes, if you are drilling oil and someone who is throwing 100 bombs into the air every other day, who is creating more heat into the environment than the other, such a conversation. And
Sure.
I remember sarcastically Donald Trump saying, you see, the United States is trying to tell other people that you cannot contribute to climate, but even us, much as we do, what we want to do is at least have military hardware, say the tanks going out there to bomb everyone, but using, maybe the tanks should be electric. So you have an electric tank coming to throw fire to your house and something of the sort. But I want to come to you, Hafashimana. You see, one of the things that comes out in all this is when I read from what he says, Africa being bullied into making certain decisions, now specifically to this climate. And my challenge is in this, how we decide as Africans and the choices we make. If Africa has been independent on average for the last 60 years, why is it such so that we cannot develop capacity in the oil and gas sector, capacity in areas of innovation, in areas of transportation, such that in case we have projects like these and many others on the continent, we do not have to yield to pressures from, for example, the European Union, like he was talking about, because it is them that are giving us the capacity to do whatever we have to do.
Historically, there is a term that we refer to as imperialism, whereby a powerful country controls over a weak country, and I think that brings the connotation of your question, why does it that we are mostly affected and directed by the EU? Why? Because EU is more powerful than Uganda, and you have to accept that. However, I recommended a decision that was taken by the Ugandan parliament, like other governments in the region, Tanzania, Kenya, in supporting the pipeline. I don't think, in fact, the countries which have done the oil industry are more advanced in Africa than those that have not.
Yeah, true.
So the idea of the Ugandan government to accept finally to, regardless of the ruling that had come from the EU Parliament, Uganda accepting to go on was a very broad decision. When you go to Karamoja has resources. In fact, it has nuclear, and you know what nuclear is responsible for. Today, Uganda is depending on Russia in weaponry terms because of nuclear. Perhaps if Uganda invested her energy in exploiting nuclear in Karamoja, then Uganda would do better. In fact, other countries would be interested in Uganda for further relationships, bilateral. And like I had just begun with, and I think I want to agree with the contention of my friends Sharon and Bushanda. They have been very elaborate, especially on these critical and sensitive matters. So some of us use perfume, and how many of us know its impact on climate? Because it has the volatile things to do with, and this compete with other pollutants in the air that finally lead to climate change because of air pollution. So how many of us understand that? So whereas we advocate for more of renewable energies, can you also invest in the solar industry? Because we are affecting or we are attacking the environment because we want to have more fossil fuels. So can you have an alternative? 2, can you also have reforms in policy?
True.
Politically, Dr. Chiza Besigye came with his reform agenda before he went to exile. And perhaps it is because he wanted to have a better political environment than how it used to be. And perhaps economically, looking at the impacts of climate change, can we look at things to do with how we can overcome global warming? Can we, like talked about innovation, young people could do innovative practices like recycling and upcycling. You have seen other people investing in businesses whereby they collect people to collect bottles so they can take them for recycling to make other In fact, if it is not the UK or America or Canada, when you visit their country, you're not supposed to dump a bottle. In fact, you are subjected to a fine. Okay? So when you use this bottle, you're supposed to put it somewhere.
Use your neighbor here, Rwanda.
Or go to our colleagues in Rwanda,
don't go far.
When you reach there, the same thing, you cannot just dump anything anyhow. You cannot enter with the kavera.
You can't.
So how is our government responding to some of the use of these things? Recently I was coming from Kiryandongo, through Nakasongora, where you see cars, counter cars carrying sacks of charcoal. He talked about it in his preamble. So where are these cars passing? Do you think the government is not aware? It is. Does it affect those people living in Nakasongora, in Nakaseke? Of course it does. So at the end of the day, it goes back to the final consumer, who is us and you. Why you get my contention of understanding?
So, thank you. I like that you say that, and you do mention about what you call the recommendations and so on. And one recommendation that stands out for me from the earlier COP26, the one that was in Scotland, was that they recommended globally human beings should reduce their appetite for beef, because when you follow the value chain in production of beef, it has a very strong impact on the environment. And usually I ask myself, and I think I should ask you, how much you've reduced your consumption of beef since then, and specifically for. But anyway, so very.
Sure, I don't eat.
Gentlemen and lady, thank you so much for those very amazing conversations, and your viewers, thank you so much for keeping it the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV. We are heading into a very short break, and we shall be right back.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that very short break. It is the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV, and I am Phillip Muliisa. Today, we took the conversation to Uganda's preparedness in addressing the emerging effects of climate change, and we are looking at things like floods, excessive heat, and so on that are happening across the region and by extension the continent now. Joining me on that conversation is a panel of distinguished young people. Godwin here, Bushanda, I have Karungi and Hafashimana, and they are doing justice to this particular topic. People, where we left off, we discussed some of these challenges and things that hinder the progress of the continent. But in this second segment, let us take the conversation now to where it should be: Uganda's preparedness. When you look at the situation in Nairobi today, I was listening to the president of Kenya a few days ago, and one of the things he was telling his people is that look for raised land and camp there for some time as the water draws away. And he was saying more than 10,000 people had nowhere to stay in Nairobi as of that time, and that is a couple of days ago. Some thousands had died, property destroyed, infrastructure destroyed. That is the situation in Nairobi. And it is a situation we've seen in a couple of other countries. A few months ago, we had the same in Rwanda. When you go outside globally, you've had, I think, still in this week, in Brazil, we had floods, very dangerous ones in that part of the world. My country, Uganda, and our response to disaster. I know we have a whole ministry for disaster preparedness. How prepared, for example, are we? When you look at the capital city of Uganda, when you look at the extremes of this country, are we ready to counter such in case it happens like it was in those areas, in Dubai, in wherever? Yes, Godwin.
One, I think Uganda as a country, you see, preparedness is a process. It is not just a one-day event. It is a process. And I believe, one, we are not prepared. And I'm going to give my reasons as to why. We are not prepared, though I don't know what people call preparedness, but preparedness is not just giving people posho or beans. Preparedness may be even the sustainability to sustain such people. If you have managed to give posho to people in Bududa, are you going to do the same in Chisoro? Are you going to do the same in Bundibujo? Are you going to do the same in the capacity? And also the minds of people, or the minds of leaders are not prepared. So them not being prepared, leaders not being prepared in the first place, are not having goodwill for preparedness, it makes this country not prepared to harness such effects. I'm going to give an example. In a situation, it was in Kasese, when the Right Honorable Prime Minister was just, I think, being appointed. They sent, blankets and what? Then the Prime Minister went there to supervise, to see the kind of materials they have given to the people. And she rejected almost all the materials. But this was coming from the office of the Prime Minister. And the Right Honorable Nabaja said, this cannot be given to a Ugandan, to a human being. It shows that the technical team that actually is responsible, that's responsible for procuring these items for people and even settling themselves mind, they are not prepared. They are not cognizant, they are not passionate, they are not even feeling bad, they are not that concerned about the people that are being affected. And it is going to leave this country, even if the president, or even if the government releases a lot of money, and the people that are given this money, the Hafashimana, the Godwins, are not prepared in terms of mind. They don't have that to say, I think we need to do this. It still makes this country not being prepared. So preparedness, I don't look at it just in a matter of having resources. You may have resources, but people are not prepared. Even if we give resources to someone who is not prepared. For example, I can give you see, we have kind of leaders who are using the government funds for such activities, like gaming money. You see, I think young people, when they bet and maybe get $1 million, they will move all over the bars in Kampala. And they will use the money the way they want, because there's no accountability, because that person has invested 10,000 and is getting $1 million. So this is the kind of mind you have in people. What we need in this and the viewers, how prepared are we in terms of mind, and how are we feeling bad for such people? From local councils, actually for the chairpersons, local council, LC1s, and you can agree, all of us have LC1. These people are very passionate about their citizens. But for us who come here and sit in AC, go in parliament and speak that good English, because for us, we want to use the situation as a driving pull for what we want. And we end up not giving these people what they deserve. Uganda, in terms of, is it prepared in terms of land? Land is there, that the government can put these people. So I wonder to some extent that what kind of leaders do we have, as well as we have these trips to go and sit in conventions, in like COP28, take that delegation, and even lobby funds to come and help such people. But then when we come here, we do opposite. So it all becomes, it comes to our attention that actually before we even say, is government having enough money, even the little that we have, that would make it strides to the level of kind of preparedness would be, we don't use it the way it's supposed to be used. And it leaves a question even, for example, I'm going to give an example. There was a time we had an earthquake in 2016, I think, 2017. It was in Rakai, and people lost their houses and what. So the government was trying to compensate. And you see, they always use the local government and what, everyone to be involved. But how many people got this compensation? People registered, people put in everything. all in vain. But to go in accounts the government for it, it releases the money, the Minister of Finance releases the money for such people, but they get the money. So at the end of the day, if we don't have prepared leaders who are intentional, this country, Uganda, shall never be prepared for such circumstances of climate change.
Thank you so much. Karungi, you see, earlier he did mention that...
You're supposed to say Miss Karungi.
Yes, Miss Karungi. My apologies on that one. But earlier he did mention that nature will kill us. And it all comes from how we behave around this nature. If we behave well, we can take a little longer, and if we misbehave, then it can happen today and tomorrow. And we've seen earthquakes across. We've seen recently there was one in China. Last year we had a very dangerous one in Turkey and Syria. We had Morocco.
We had Morocco.
Very dangerous one. We had the challenges in Libya. We had the challenges in Mozambique down here. And these things keep happening. When you look at the capacity of our institutions, and if I'm specific, the Uganda Police and the, call it Fire and Rescue Department, the equipment we have, the human resource we have in that department, the kind of training they have, and of course all other departments in the country that should be able to assist. The monies we're investing vis-a-vis the magnitude of challenges we are likely to face, are we being sincere? Are we being fair? Are we even minding about our own living?
Okay, first and foremost, we need to understand that Uganda is a vulnerable country. And I think it's ranked 15th on its kind of vulnerability. Then it's again ranked 147 on its readiness to combat climate change or to things that affect or the effects of climate change. So this kind of financial aid that we put in these departments, or this kind of labor that we put in to make sure that these kind of departments run, it's really not worth it, because if it was worth it in the first place, we wouldn't be having all these kind of challenges as a country. Because let's first borrow a leaf from those other countries outside, let's say the developed countries. These are countries that know that, yeah, even if climate change came on board, at least they are kind of prepared to handle specific things that are going to handle the effects of climate change. Now, for Uganda, already the economies are being affected by the small effects that are there. So what happens when it now comes out in the long run, or it comes and hits heavy? So that is why I feel like it is not really fair for this kind of aid to be put into this. They'd rather put it in something, like they would rather decide to embark it on something that is more beneficial or more practical. Earlier on, we were all talking about oil and all that, because I believe right now that's where money is going. But is it really a necessity? Like, the whole economy can't run on one department. Let's say the economy of Uganda can't run on oil only. Before oil was extracted, or before they learned about the oil and all that, wasn't Uganda a country that was trying to survive on its own? It was really surviving. So at a point in time, we now start glorifying the fact that, oh, now Uganda is going to extract minerals, it's going to extract things like fossils and all that, or maybe the major thing is oil, then that is more problematic, because now you're showing people that now you're diverting from things like agriculture, you're diverting things like tourism and all that, to oil mining and all that. So that is why it's so problematic when you start investing in, let's say, departments of crises and all that, because this is not something that they're not going to do anything. That is why in most cases we feel like the money that comes, government dishes out to different departments, is a waste, because these people all are there because they feel like, already I told you, people these days are more of money minded and all that. At a point in time when you squeeze them and they know they can get something out of a specific department, they will do so. So that is why I feel like they are wasting a lot of money in these things. They'd rather come back now on board, deep down in the villages, because even if, yes, what you train them that, or when things like crises come on board, like let's look at COVID-19 and all that, when they come on board, how prepared are we? Are those people really going to? Because at the end of the day, they're not even enough. Or people don't even know that these specific departments even exist. Because if I found a problem, it's not really going to, a person deep down, let's say from his village, they won't know that those departments exist in the first place. They'll do whatever it takes for them to survive and all that. And this whole crisis that we are talking about on how Uganda must be prepared and all that, Uganda is totally not prepared for the incoming effects of climate change in the long run, because we are ignoring the fact that people are still adamant, people are still selfish, people do things that benefit themselves, not to the entire good, and that the government puts people's livelihood or people's economy or the economy at the expense of them wanting to push out something. So that is why in the first place I was all against the issue of mining and all that in terms of oil, because you cannot put someone's life.
Before you got oil, sorry for this, for information, is even the parliament prepared?
Yeah, that's why I said Uganda is still vulnerable. Why? Because even our own leaders are not ready for that. That is why I told you there are very many effects. Let's first put aside the climate change effect. Already, our economy is still being affected by small things like corruption, things like...
They are not small things.
They are not small things.
No, like, yeah,
corruption is...
If we are to weigh the things that are happening, climate change effects are more of... It has a bigger impact compared to corruption.
But you know, corruption is causing climate change.
Okay, that is why I'm saying that.
So corruption remains.
It is.
Okay,
Actually, climate change is a subset of corruption.
In fact, there is no funding for climate, just because of corruption.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is why I'm saying that Uganda is not really ready for this. And first of all, as I said, that nature can really kill us, we have to acknowledge that all this is Mother Nature. Mother Nature has the ability or the capacity to protect you.
You cannot stretch
it
land.
Has the capacity to destroy you. So at a point in time, when you showed Mother Nature that you cannot protect it from things that are going to affect it, we go on to do things like deforestation, you're going to do things like high carbon emissions in the air, you're going to do a lot of dumping waste and all that. It is going to kill you. This is why you're saying we are having things like high levels of floods, you're seeing things like earthquakes, things like high temperatures and all that. This is us being punished for the things that we know are bad, but to continue doing them. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Hafashimana.
Yes, sir.
You see, President Ruto was telling Kenyans to look for raised land. I assume if it were in Uganda, then they would be telling us to shift to areas of Kisoro, Kanungu, Kabale, Rukonjiri, because at least you have a quite more raised hills and mountains in that part of the country than there are in central and certainly eastern. But looking at for example, the tsunamis we hear of, the very strong earthquakes we hear of, and the nature of planning we have in our capital city. How do you see us getting out of these challenges in case they arise in this country?
I do not know why I gave a smile, but it is very interesting.
Hauna jibu.
Birds sing, not because they have to sing. They sing because they have the song to sing. That notion of the statement brings me to a reality whereby our government mobilizes youth, younger people, even elderly chairman, LC5 MPs, to take them to chimpanzees for ideological training. Can't the narrative also change so that maybe these people are mobilized like they are mobilized, they will be taken somewhere in chimpanzee or anywhere for now climate justice engagements? Because the more we have, like she put it, the more we have one department empowered and the other is not empowered, then at the end of the day we shall not balance the equation. Whereas Ruto has been very clear and communicating to our colleagues in Kenya that they should find raised areas to stay in, the question is it just, or are they even available? When you get out of Uganda to the western part of Kenya, in Eldoret, in Naivasha, Nakuru. That place looks to be more of a desert, and it is in fact a flat land. Okay, so apart from a few raised places, and of which I think they are not good for human settlement, that means it is not very fair. Maybe what I could agitate for, one, let there be government funding, and that is not just for the case of Kenya. Let it cut across all the governments, either in the region or in Africa and across. Whereas we believe that Uganda is a pearl, I think there are things that we have not paid attention to. In fact, in the next 5 years, I was just making research about 2 days ago. In case there is no drastic approach to ensure that we create climate justice, we are going to have an increase of 0.1 to 1.1 degrees Celsius increase in temperatures. And that is going to be very deadly. There is what we call the tipping effect, whereby in case we do not have these changes done by us, the human beings, human race will be no more in the next 5 years, by the way, unless there is no. So whereas we contend about funding of the climate, we have the climate organizations. When you look at there's this thing of Edwin, is it yes, Muliisa,
Go Green,
the Go Green Uganda, and others to do with, I have seen Mr. Robert to Jachira advocating for all the things in the case many of them mentioned them. Even the UPFIA has come to advocate for the same thing. So many organizations are now combating on the same thing. Looking at Youth in Forum, I was there, they say the same thing is, so unless we come to the reality of what we are facing today, human race is going to be no more. There is as to why you see he talked about overpopulation in this country. When you go to Kabale, there has been an old adage that people oversleep because of the place being cold. And when they oversleep, there is another misconception that people overproduce. And when they overproduce, we have very many people on the ground. And how much land we have there, it does not change. It is static, there is no change. But more people are being birthed. At the end of the day, if there is a wetland there, it will be attacked. When the wetland is attacked, of course, it goes back to the consumer. So as we talk of afforestation, reforestation, all of those good actions, I mean, we must have funding by the government. By the way, there is a time when I reach and I realize that we must not agree with some of those statements. There are fallacies which are haunting us, that there is no money in the government. If there is no money in the government, how comes the speaker visits a certain place and they drop their 50 million? If there is no money, they go at a vigil or a burial, they are giving state fund. I don't want to really feel that there is no money in the government. In the days of Idi Amin Dada, I think you must have watched a documentary whereby I think one of his women was giving a testimony that Amin never wanted the money to get back to the personal individuals. The money was meant for the state. So the state means that, or the government means that there should be that money that comes from the government with a small O, I mean small G. Then there's also the government with a big G, I think, which is now the Wananchi. So the Wananchi must be supported using the state money that must be made to ensure that there is all of these justices, that maybe there is. By the way, there is food insecurity going to come. Because if there is no...
It's already there.
It is even already there. Because some people sleep hungry, whereas others are sleeping the way they want. Recently, we had increased the water levels, I think, at River Kafu. When you go to Hoima and you are going either to Kagadi, there is a bridge there. So I'm told that water level had increased to about 6-10 meters from the ground level. And what do you talk about that? Isn't it about climate? You have seen our colleagues from West Nile going to the north. Karuma is no more. You have seen it has broken down. Is it a question of climate change? I think yes. And they are spending much more and is perturbing and encroaching on their pockets. Today, transport from there is 100 km from
Go
to Kampala.
to Rwera and see how many sand excavators are there.
And you see, gentlemen, if you allow me even on that particular issue now, the kind of challenges we get, little drops of rainfall, a bridge collapses, the quality of our infrastructure. Every other rainy season, we must have a major bridge collapse, a major road overrun, maybe washed away, a major school washed away. The quality of our infrastructure, is it what we should be having as a people? I know you...
Of course, you saw the only bridge you saw in Jinja. I don't know its exact name, but you know there is a bridge going to the city of Ginger. At some time it cracked down. And the blame was put to those who constructed it. I don't know if it is the World Bank or the Chinese or the European Union, but where is the exact problem? Is it a question of leadership now? Maybe Bushanda, because he's a leader and has been part of the debating unit from Karungi University, he has done research about that.
Because you see, the reason I raise this, every other day we have a major project in the country. It is either the money meant to put it in place was eaten, or the project was executed, but the quality. Isimba Dam was commissioned less than a year ago. Today it is closed for repairs. A lot of government money. We are paying back the loan we took. The dam is not working.
Talk about
Karuma Dam, Lubawa Hospital, all these major projects. And what we have, maybe the only successful project is us constructing a new parliamentary building to accommodate the very many MPs we have. That one has not cracked, at least to the best of my knowledge. But all these projects that are meant to benefit the people, where is the challenge? Maybe you can help, whoever has something to say about this, please.
Let me tell you, Muliisa. I think God used the floods during the time of Noah, right? And what was the reason?
The people had
It was a punishment, like you said.
Very good. Now, God gave chance and sent His Son Jesus Christ to come to the world, save us, and then Jesus went back to heaven, and then Jesus left us with the Holy Spirit.
Where was Adam by the time God sent Jesus?
So now, God has reached a period of time. You see, this is a reality. Just people don't want to accept. Either Godwin or Hafashimana or you or this lady here, God is going to punish us simply by doing whatever is supposed to be nature. Let me give you an example. The issue, like you asked about why do we have poor infrastructure, why do we have... I told you we have unserious leaders in this country. I can speak about that. You see what the parliament is talking about? For them, what they are talking about is having a saloon at the parliament. Gym. Huh? But the issue of Kasese, the issue of Bundibujo having lands, it is not an issue on the floor of parliament.
Yeah.
It is not an issue. But the issue is we need a saloon. We need to see where those jokes. They think this word is just there for jokers. You forget that the same leaders are having the leader who is demanding for saloon. You think she has time to talk about the floods in Kasese? No. So we have leaders who are not patriotic and they are not nationalistic by nature. For them, they are here, their aim is one. Actually, I think I've been observing many. Their aim is one. Steal as much as you can because tomorrow you're going to die. You don't mind about Hafashimana and Bushanda. Let the 10,000 people die. That me, I survive as an individual. That's what they are doing. That's what the leaders are communicating. So we have selfish people who are not nationalistic, who are not patriotic, who are very, very... There's a time that the president made a statement that he's no longer interested in employing, is it people from poor families? That they steal, and he wants not to get these people from rich families. But I think this is Uganda was, and he has sampled a few. He has been disappointed, some have been arrested. I don't know what is his other technique, because I know he's very technical. I don't know what he's going to bring on board again. But one thing I can tell you is that 85% of the leaders we have, whether at local government, whether at parliament, they are not concerned. Mind you, these swamps, most of these swamps you see in local governments, in districts, the local government and what, these are deals that you see a person to go through. See, Hafashimana, I build here, and they connive with the Minister of Local Government, they talk, they go to the Minister of Finance, and by the time, you see, these people, don't expect Matia Kasaija, Honorable Matia Kasaija, don't expect Honorable Finanite, don't expect to traverse the whole country to know what is there. Yet it would be their aim to move and know the geography of this country. The only person who has the geography of this country is Museveni, by the way, the president. You can never lie to him that this is this, this is this. One time he was going to Kaweweta to commission the cadets. So he passed on a road and he complained. When he got a microphone, who is the MP of this area? The MP came and said, what kind of leaders are you? You just construct a road as if it is a swimming pool. You don't have drainage system, you don't have what. He told him, next time I come back and I find this road is like this, I'm going to ask everyone who was part of this road to be sanctioned. Trust me, they changed the kind of construction of the road. But do you know the money they had given that road? A lot of money. But they should have worked. So not until the president had to complain because the president uses it. So how many roads in this country? There are some that the president may finish a year without even visiting, given 5 years. Just visiting a certain school, there's a meeting and he goes. So
Thank you.
meaning people down there, but for the kind of president, as I'm fishing, the president will have, for him, he thinks that all the people he appoints, they are thinking like him, which is not true.
Yes.
He thinks that when he entrusts you with an office, if you're a DC, if you're a minister, you're on his ideology. Yet these people are not at all. So there is a lot of, the president has to change, there must be a paradigm shift to see that the kind of people he's having, they're not following his vision, what's Uganda to look like.
Thank you. Madam Karungi, let's talk conservation. I know he did mention we have a couple of organizations, but ideally some of the organizations, all they do in their huge numbers is talk about these things. But practically, what should we be doing as a country, as a people, as a government, to make sure that, because I know we have the National Planning Authority, we've had...
The one which is headed by the Premier of Usoga?
Yes, we've had a series of implementation of the National Development Plan, 1, 2, 3. And I know today I think we're on 4 something. Are we still on 3 or 4?
We're on 3.
And a couple of these things, but the planning doesn't seem to be represented on the ground. When you go to Kasese, you talked about Kasese, you look at the streams. Do we even plan for how water should be flowing? Do we look at how the streams are washing away land and how they are flowing all this land, soil into the lakes, and the siltation happening, and the agriculture, the effect of agriculture on these water bodies, the forests, how we cut them down, looking at the role of NEMA in this whole equation, the Ministry of Environment, all these things are in place. But what should we be doing as a country, and what is the role of all these organizations?
Okay, thank you so much. I'll kind of begin on a sad note that I feel like, yeah, a lot of theories have been put in place, a lot of policies have been put in place, plannings and all that. Money has been dished everywhere for these plans to go through and all that. But then this actually goes back to how we perceive these plans to be, and is there a follow-up at the end of the day? If I'm given money to go and construct a specific bridge, or if I'm given money to go and, let's say, create reserves on a specific game park and all that, is government going to go down there and follow up? Are there people who are genuinely going to come and say, okay, I did inspection on this ABCD and this is what has come out? We lack such kind of people in society, and we lack such kind of people in our parliament system, and we lack such kind of people everywhere we go. A lot of things have, you see, it is, even if you came and told me about the theories on how to conserve the environment, because we have learned these things right away from primary and all that. They tell you that when you cut down a tree, you kind of affect the rainfall formation and all that. This is what we have learned. But you see, when a child is growing up, they say we look up to our parents. Even when you teach them a specific thing and tell them that, oh, when you cut down a tree, replace it. But if I'm moving around as a child and I've seen many trees being cut and not replaced, what happens then? These specific children are going to grow up knowing that I'm not going to be punished. But even if, yes, they've done that, how many times have we seen, let's say, the organizations in charge of game parks and all that, arresting people who are maybe encroaching on, let's say, game reserves, encroaching on roads, or who are building in wetlands? It is a matter of them coming and giving you a specific warning, but then that warning doesn't really make a big adjustment to how we want this conservation to be. Because in the long run, you see, we have a mindset that looks at short things only, whereby we look at, we live in a world whereby I look at something that is going to benefit me at that specific moment. I do not look at something that is going to benefit me now and in the near future. And that is why I feel like this is what Uganda we are still lacking. We are lacking implementation plans whereby, yes, we can make all those kind of policies, we can make those all kind of theories and all that, but the point in time when you do not follow up on things that are happening, when you to go on ground and because I believe the president might issue out that money. I think money has always been put there and to tell the people that you go and look at how roads have been constructed, how game reserves have been protected and all that, or how people are not encroaching there. But people just in the long run they satisfy themselves and all that.
Thank you so much. Hafashimana, briefly in a minute, I want you to contribute to that conversation. Government institutions, a few months ago, if not weeks, I was listening to the spokesperson of KCCA, and he was giving an account of about Kasokoso swamp. He says this is a swamp they had prioritized as the capital city authority to conserve and make sure it is not encroached on. However, they were surprised to go there monitoring, and they found it had been divided into 60 different plots, all belonging to high-ranking government officials. And the KCC staff that went there to inspect and do the monitoring was actually, I don't know whether to call it abducted, or they were held in that particular, there was one site on that land, swamp land, where they were held for about 2 weeks by one of the people that had taken a plot in the swamp, and police could not help until these people felt now we can release you, and they released these people. The impunity. And we've had these stories across, people constructing wetlands and nothing is done. Law enforcers come, NEMA comes, puts out a statement, the construction continues. How do you address this challenge in a minute?
Where there is a mess, there is a message. And where there is a crime, there is a crisis. And most of these things are politically geared
Sure.
and motivated. I think when you talk of Sokoso, is it Sokoso Wetland?
Kasokoso.
Wetland. You have had a scenario whereby one of the politicians had an argument with the government or that share in Ruzira. I think a piece of land is supposed to be meant for construction of, I think, of a hospital or something like that. And these are politicians. And while a group of people were hijacked in that wetland, and perhaps KCCA's agitation was to ensure that it is reserved and preserved for future benefit of human race.
Because it is an anchor, it helps drain much of the water from the capital city.
From the capital city, especially for the drainage system. So in the end, this is a question of leadership. And I think if it's not, I think yesterday I did mention that the problems we have today are not only supposed to be a blame of our leaders, but us, the people who choose those leaders. And it comes back to, I think, the conversation we have similarly had here about loving money. I'm sure those things are also happening because of the monetary reasons. And because there always interest among those those political players in the end game, I think there is always a negotiation. Either KCCA has a little bit failed on implementation because of political interests now. Because there is none of these leaders who are not aware. So the question is, has it also been a point of contention at the floor of parliament? Or it is something being kept quiet about? And therefore none of us, or none of the leaders in there, are even coming out to say on this. At the end of the day, who should answer these questions that are affecting climate justice?
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our time is very, very much fast spent. I'll give a minute to each of you to give your concluding remarks on this particular topic and what you think can be the way forward in terms of trying to now reverse this very dangerous and scary situation in the country, but also the continent and the world at large, and we shall call it. Shall we start with you?
Yes, to our viewers, one, if we don't devise our means of how we handle the nature is going to kill us. That's the truth. But also two, as we have had strikes political strikes, we can also have climate strikes.
Perfect.
As we need to address the issue of climate with an objective mind. Let's not be so political in this. Otherwise, climate change doesn't know whether I'm belong to this party or to this. It's going to take everyone. But also to put this in contention, if we talk about planting trees, let's be climate patriots. If we talk about planting trees, how many people are born? How many people celebrate birthdays every day? Many of them. If every time you celebrate a birthday and plant a tree, better. But also, if we go back, for us who have seen such impacts, if we go back to the villages, let's tell people what to do. Let's advise people not to construct in swamps. But the most thing that is disturbing me before I finish all this, I don't know why the government has refused and adamantly, I don't know, I'm going to go back and read. Why is it finding it hard to ban Buvera? I don't know. But I'm going to go back and make a necessary research. Because Buvera is becoming a very big problem.
Make those Buveras, they pay taxes. And yet the government needs those taxes.
Now we are going to die before even benefiting from the taxes we pay.
That could be a reason, but also another is who actually owns these companies, because these are multi-billion plastic companies.
Yeah, sure. But otherwise, to the viewers and the Muliisa and everyone, climate is an issue to be addressed. As we have political strikes, let's have also climate strikes.
Thank you so much. Hafashimana.
Number one, there is, or there used to be, what we call the PP, polluter pay principle. I do not know if it is affected, or I don't know if the policy reformers have really looked into the depth of that. Number two, let the government increase the funding of climate change, climate justice, and all of those. Number three, there is no time. And if there is no time, then time is now. And therefore it is incumbent upon the current leaders, both young and old, to really interest themselves into some of these discussions and conversations around promoting of the climate justice. Meanwhile, let them stop teaching people in primary parts of an insect. Let them stop teaching these younger kids parts of a flower. Let these topics in primary schools and secondary schools shift on how we should be able to combat.
Because we shall start buying flowers as specimens from outside. Because we know nature is taking us.
There should be a paradigm shift, like one of our colleagues put it earlier before. And with that, Asantine.
Thank you. And last word on the show, Miss Sharon Karungi. How do we consolidate our energies to make sure we survive as a human race?
Okay, thank you so much to our viewers. It has been a great experience. But also let's notice that climate change or this kind of climate crisis is something that is serious. We may not look at it as something that is urgent right now, but trust me, in the near future, we shall have to pay for this. As I earlier on said that the moment we protect Mother Nature will also protect us in the long run. That is why I feel like your government should put in more effort. For my country like Uganda, we should try to bring up more mechanisms in terms of adaptation and mitigation of climate change and all that. And also we as citizens, we shouldn't all focusedly put the blame on government, but it all begins with us, me and you, whereby we have to understand that climate change is something that we should treasure. We should look at it like something that we value. Like the way you value your own self is the same way you should value things like climate change. So as he said that every time you celebrate a birthday, you need to you can also decide to make it as a culture that every time you celebrate a birthday, you plant a specific number of trees. Or every time you go out there and you feel like you're happy, instead of wasting money into things that don't really concern us, things that don't concern academic health and all that, then that means we could do things that really come up with research, like things of how to adopt and mitigate climate change. But then lastly, let's involve ourselves in more discussions. People in schools such as universities, secondary schools or primary level, government should put in more effort to make it a mandate for every level of education for someone to study the conservation of climate change and how to also to address how things like climate change need to be addressed in the long run. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Karungi Sharon, for those amazing views and for being with us today. Godwin Bushanda, thank you so much for joining us today and for the amazing views. And Hafashimana Asiimwe, the only man on the panel who has only African names. Very interesting. Thank you so much.
Name.
Yes, for sharing your views and joining us today. And to our viewers, thank you so much for being on the Youth Roundtable. Climate change, indeed, like you heard from these very amazing and knowledgeable people, is not a matter of government, is not a matter of the TV where you're watching it from. It is a matter that is near you. When the heat comes, you feel it in your house. When the floods come, you feel them on your doorstep. You need to act. Whether planting on your birthday, whether planting every morning you wake up, you say, for me, my goal is making sure every other day I'm alive and healthy. I will celebrate it by planting a tree. It can contribute to sustainability of humanity, and that is all we need as human beings. Thank you so much. Special thanks to Center for Constitutional Governance and to the people behind the machines. Thank you so much for making this possible. We continue to call for peace in all the regions of the world that are in turmoil. Peace in Ukraine, peace in Gaza, peace in Sudan, peace in Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Mozambique, DRC, Congo,
Somalia.
Uganda, Kenya, Somalia, and all other parts of the world. We have areas that are not as such peaceful. We want peace. Very interesting. It should be that sustainability based on climate change should match sustainability of humanity in terms of peace. And from us we say good evening, and may you have freedom always.